it was double hard on Stone Cold to really keep getting over and keep that momentum when his three main foils were who? Vince McMahon, over 50 years old, Pat Patterson, over 50 years old, and Gerald Brisco, over 50 years old.
When I recently interviewed the great Arn Anderson for this very channel, I introduced him as arguably the best tag team wrestler of all time. The man I'm speaking to right now is pretty much in the conversation for the same distinction. It is my absolute honor and privilege to invite the great Gerald Brisco to Sportskeeda Wrestling. You have seen him dominate the tag team world with his brother. You have seen him as a part of the Stooges. And you have also heard a million stories about him and from him on his podcast. We will touch upon all of that. How are you doing, sir?
Well, great. Thank you. It's such a big honor to be on your show. A lot of my friends, Dutch Mantel, John Layfield, and so many others you've interviewed, I've almost felt like I was left out, like I wasn't wanted. But after that introduction, man, I just really appreciate the introduction. I have seen a lot. I'm old. That's the reason I've seen a lot. I hope to see a heck of a lot more around here. But I'm really excited about this interview and just I really appreciate the attention. When you get up there in age, attention, I kind of ran from all that when I was young and in the ring because I didn't want it to go to my head. But now that I'm old and I got nothing else, it can all go to my head. And all that's got to put up with me is my wife, and she just slapped me around, brings me back down to earth, when I get a little too obnoxious. So thanks again for having me on. It's a true honor.
It is. We have saved the best for last. We have had so many great on, and we are absolutely privileged to have you on. So I am in my 30s right now. So even though I discovered everything you did with your brother later on, I discovered you as a part of the Stooges. How did a serious professional wrestler like you, unleash his comedic chops? And
you're trying to be polite. How did a serious wrestler like you become a stooge? Is what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you being polite, but this is your show, so you can say whatever you want. So, but that's a great question, and it's of course it's just evolved from what I was, and that's one thing I used to really nail Patterson on. We'd be sitting there getting ready to do one of these really goofy segments, we used to do on Raw, and they were goofy. They were so out of character for Pat, so out of character for me. I'd elbow Pat. I said, Pat, all those fans that wanted to kill you in the Cow Palace because you were such a great heel, they're laughing at you now. And he'd look at me. I said, we spent our entire career working our butts off trying to be a credible, respectable talent. And we received that. We got a reputation of being, pretty good in the ring. Him great in the ring and, pretty good in the ring. But now all this generation here, they're not going to remember all that stuff. All they're going to remember is those two stumbling, bumbling stooges of Vince McMahon. We created a whole new character for each other. Don't say that, Brisco. Don't say that. That's so depressing. And then he'd go out and he'd have the time of his life, as I would. It was a fun time during that. If you couldn't have fun during that time, you were way too damn serious about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Right before this interview, I was watching your evening gown match with Pat Patterson, which actually brings me to my next question. Like I mentioned to you on chat, Bill Apter is our senior editor, and he sends a question. Obviously, we lost Pat Patterson, one of the biggest names in the wrestling business ever. Do you have any fond memories to share or a tribute that you'd like to say on our show?
Oh, Pat, I got so many fond memories of Pat. Most of them just ribbing each other. I've ribbed him, we being me, Bruce Pritchard, and Jim Ross would rib Pat so bad sometimes. He would want us to stop on a highway and let him out of the car. He said, I don't care. I'll catch the next car that's coming along behind her. Somebody will recognize me and pick me up. we would just unmercifully rib Pat about anything and everything. And he was such a good sport. Mostly we'd rib him about work and what he had become, out of that Cow Palace, out of Pat Patterson, greatest wrestler of all time, the greatest mind of all time. But also in that car, as we're ribbing Pat would also, he was so sharp. He would turn it into a learning lesson to all of us. Don't rib me because I'm sharper than you guys, and I'll get back on you. And he usually did. But Pat, his mind, and most of all in the car, we'd just talk wrestling because Pat was an encyclopedia of wrestling, and Pat was one of those guys that no matter how far you went back in his career, he could put the match together in his mind that he had 30, 40 years ago. And I believe that's the reason Pat was so good with finishes, because he had those flashbacks and he'd remember every damn move and every little nuance, stop here and look at the crowd. And Pat would remember that. And so talking business in a car with Pat was like, man, I got the Encyclopedia Britannica here. I better take advantage of this. So we all did. And Pat would share his knowledge with us right and left, as he did all the talent in the WWE.
Amazing. And like I said at the beginning, it's amazing that two sharp minds like yours became stooges again. But you can't speak of that era without mentioning Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I mean, you have eaten many stunners through that period of time. Did you expect him to come back in 2022 and main event WrestleMania?
Here's the thing about Stone Cold. We knew what we had, of course, with Stone Cold. We knew we were helping develop the hottest character ever. And each night you could feel that growth. That was what was really prided myself and Patterson with was experiencing the growth of Stone Cold during this, and also not only the growth of Stone Cold, but the growth of Mr. McMahon. Now we're taking a guy who had never been in the ring, basically. I mean, he would bench as a character off screen, but he had never been on screen character like that. And watch him develop into a professional wrestler instead of a promoter. And he just soaked it up. He was a lot like Patterson. He would come to us and, okay, here's what I got to do. You guys help me out. So we would bounce things off of each other. And I got to say, a lot of people look at McMahon and say, man, Mr. McMahon, and say, man, he's arrogant, he's cocky, but when it came to learning time, he was a sponge also. He would ask Pat, now, how do I get out of this situation? But and we would teach him. So the development of Pat, of Steve, and the growth of Vince in the ring as an in-ring performer. He never got to be the greatest in the world, but he got to be where he was as good as just about anybody out there, and had a hell of a lot more heat than most guys out there. But Stone Cold in the beginning. Here's a guy now. I really have a lot of respect for Steve, and here's why. Here's a guy that's getting the push, getting that tap on the shoulder. So get your butt out there, and you're going to carry this company. You're the guy. You're the guy that's going to carry this company. Okay, but this is what we're going to build you with. We're going to build you with three guys over 50 years old. We're not going to build you with your contemporaries. We're going to build you with three guys that are over 50 years old. And he really had his doubts on whether or not he could do it, but whether or not we could keep up with him, because he told me one time, he said, Brisco, he said, I'm like all these other guys. I'm like Taker, I'm like Shawn Michaels, I'm like Bret Hart, all these other guys out there. I'm going to get over. He said, and you're my opponent. He said, so if I'm stiff with you out there, he said, I'm trying to do my job. And he said, I can't help it that what your age is. He said, but they put you there and they expect you to do it. And he said, most of all, I expect you to be there when I'm ready to do something. So it was kind of a challenge. So, it was double hard on Stone Cold to really keep getting over and keep that momentum when his three main foils were who? Vince McMahon, over 50 years old, Pat Patterson, over 50 years old, and Gerald Brisco, over 50 years old. But you know what? He'd come up after a night where we did it all good, and he'd pat us on the, hey man, you guys are as good as anybody on this roster. Don't let anybody talk down to you. You know, because he got to know it. But I don't blame him. All the guys were like, none of the guys, you know, we were well into our 50s. Stone Cold, look at all the competition there with Stone Cold. The guys I just knew, Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, you know, go on and on, Triple H, all those guys trying to get to that top. The Rock come along, and Stone Cold is working with these three old men, where the other guys are working with guys. They can go out and have these star matches every night. Well, we could have heat matches, but you know, a lot of them, they weren't particularly high rated matches there. They weren't expected to be, but they did the job. They got Steve over, so he had to work his ass off. All the guys would tell us, we're going to work with you guys the same way that we would work with a regular opponent on the roster, regardless of your age. So it was up to us to pick up our game every night. They didn't have to pick up their game. We had to pick up our game to match them. They had to pick up their game to carry us through a lot of this stuff. But they had to improve their stuff, and they had to be on the ball and basically carry three old men out there. And man, nobody did it better than that damn Stone Cold Steve Austin.
And finally, you have heard so many stories from Mr. Jerry Brisco. You can hear a million more stories on his podcast. So could you tell our listeners and all our viewers how they can log in and view your podcast?
Well, thank you very much. It's JBL and I, John Bradshaw Layfield and I, hooked up, you know, during the pandemic because, you know, we're just basically to put a smile on our faces, just started telling those stories to each other, you know. And a friend of ours that's a Japanese amateur national champion that we're both a mutual friend, one of the Wall Street guys up in New York that I've become friends with. And so he said, why don't you guys do a podcast together? Because we kind of, JBL and I kind of just bullshit on a little group text that we have. And, you know, all the guys on the group text, you got to, do it. So Yoshi Nakamura is the one responsible for that. So if you hate us, look up Yoshi Nakamura and take it out on him either. But be careful. He's a shooter and a half. But yeah, we tell a story. We just started doing it, you know, just out of boredom, and then it just kind of turned into something. People started enjoying it, and it started growing a little bit, and we just kept doing it, you know. And then you know, the great thing about we get to reunite with some of our old friends, like Stan Hatch and like Dutch Mantell was recently on. But we get to reunite with them and relive some of those old glory days that we think are glory days in the sport. And some of the greatest stories in the history of the business are told by guys who not heard about them, but guys who were either involved in them or created the story by being the catalyst of the story. So we were bringing those original storytellers in, and you know, just sharing the stories that are famous in our business, or at least famous in the locker room of our business. And we're enjoying doing it. And like I said, with the chance to reunite with some of our old buddies, we're having a ball doing it. And I think people can see that we're enjoying each other, and we're enjoying working with the guests that we have on. And it's more like a conversation than it is a Q&A for us anyway. And I hope it is for the people. But yeah, check it out. Anywhere you get your podcast, Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw, YouTube, just what is it? You got to hit that little thumbs up thing and say you like the thing, even if you don't live one time, you know, and hit that thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up. I think you'll enjoy the stories, though. If you don't, leave a comment, but hit that thumbs up for us. Thank you.
And if you enjoyed all of the stories on this podcast, I'm sure you'll enjoy all of the stories on that podcast. I am a fan. We at Sportskeeda, we cover many stories from the podcast every single week. So thank you, Jerry Brisco, for agreeing to be on our podcast. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for your insights. And we hope to have you back again at some point.
Anytime you want, I'll make time for you anytime. This has been fun. I hope it's enjoyable to all your fans out there.